Over 2 million people were reported to have died in that year alone.
The whole of Africa was being taken for a ride.
It's fine for people in rich countries to say this is what it ought to be. They don't have to live in these little villages and watch people die like flies.
Where are the drugs? The drugs are where the disease is not.
You fight our patent monopolies, we will make sure you die.
As long as drugs are not available to everybody, he will not take them.
It was just kind of a crisis of humanity. People just weren't really human for a moment.
Well, basically, I think the story sort of came to me by accident, to be honest. I was working on a film in Sri Lanka in 2004, and I had a day off and just happened to read an article in The Economist, of all things, which it struck me as very interesting because it was about one of the characters in our film, Dr. Yusuf Hamid, who's an Indian generic drug maker, and it was talking about how he was bringing in low-cost antiretroviral medications to Africa. Yet it seemed something interesting was going on beneath the surface. It seemed like this was obviously, you know, to my mind, a very good thing that he was doing, but they were going out of their way, I felt, to attack him, but it wasn't clear why. So it piqued my interest. And, you know, not long later, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Hamid, and through him, I met several of the other people that became contributors to the film. And I used to be in the academic world, and you know, the historian in me was just completely shocked and scandalized that A, I didn't know more about this story, and B, that there was so little written about it, or you know, there were no comprehensive accounts of what had happened. You know, something that had killed 10, 12 million people, and it seemed to have happened almost without a record. So, you know, the impetus to make the film primarily was actually to create a record, a memorial, and a chronicle of what happened, and what, as you say, I mean, we consider this to be the crime of the century.
Dr. Mo is featured in the film, and it's an honor to have you here with us before you head back home to Uganda, where you had been imprisoned, jailed, as you tried to bring generic drugs into Uganda to get these drugs at a cheaper amount. Explain what Dr. Hamid did this, I mean, what CIPLA, the head of CIPLA did, this drug company, how he challenged the rest of the world in saying he would cut the prices of AIDS drugs from, well, what was it? The amount that people would have to pay for the triple cocktail before and after, Hamid?
Well, there was a misinformation, worldwide misinformation, that AIDS drugs were too expensive to manufacture. The second misinformation that was there was that Africans would not be able to use these drugs, that it was impossible to use these drugs in the African condition. Dr. Hamid called the bluff of all of those who were propagating this false information that cost so many lives of people.
How?
Well, he just literally announced that it is not true that these drugs can only be manufactured at such an exorbitant cost. He demonstrated that they could be demonstrated at a relatively affordable cost, which would save millions of lives because of affordability. So it was the issue of affordability and access where Hamid came in and
so before
acted.
him, a drug company was charging like $15,000 for a year for one patient to get a triple cocktail for the year, and he cut that price to less than $1 a day, $15,000 to $350 for the year?
Yes, and that action was incredible. For the first time, millions of people who were dying stopped dying in Africa because they started accessing life-saving drugs.
Why did you end up in jail in Uganda?
Well, it was, I was arrested, but I was rescued because Uganda government was concerned about the plight of the citizens who are dying in such a big number. So an emergency meeting that rescued me from arrest took place, involved government ministers, and at that meeting, I made it clear. I said to the meeting that, look, your relatives are dying of AIDS. Your citizens are dying of AIDS. I'm a doctor working among the AIDS patients, and I have no tools to save my patients' lives. All I have done is to import affordable drugs, which will increase access. These drugs are at the airport. They are under your care. You can block them from coming in, but as far as I'm concerned, I've done my job of bringing life-saving drugs to Uganda. And I think they understood. Every one of them had relatives who were suffering from AIDS, or at least a friend whom they knew who had died of AIDS. And so it was not very difficult to convince them that this action was necessary, and I needed to be out saving lives with drugs instead of being arrested.